All right, let's dive into this. JSW Steel. You sent over a ton of info on them. Seems like you're really interested in their financials, all those big expansion plans they have, and how they're handling this whole sustainability push.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. They're really trying to make a name for themselves, not just in India, but globally. And they're making some pretty bold moves to get there.
For sure. And to get a sense of where they might be going,
Yeah.
we should probably start with where they are now, financially speaking.
Absolutely.
One of the reports you sent breaks down their revenue and profit margins. A couple things really stood out to me.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, first, they've got a 2.7% year-over-year revenue growth.
That might not seem like a huge jump.
Right, but when you think about how the global economy is doing, all the stuff the steel industry is dealing with.
Holding steady is already an achievement in itself these days.
Exactly, and a 2.7% increase. That suggests they're actually doing better than some of their competitors.
That's a good point. It's all about context, isn't it?
Totally. But what really caught my eye was their operating EBITDA.
Ah.
A 43% jump year over year. That's huge, especially with an EBITDA margin of 16.3%.
It means they're not just surviving, they're making smart moves that are driving profitability.
Exactly. So how are they doing it?
Well, if we dig a little deeper, we see that lower coke and coal prices help boost that EBITDA.
Oh, okay.
But they're not just getting lucky. They're actively managing their energy consumption too, which is helping to balance out the rising costs of iron ore. It's a really efficient way to manage costs.
Smart. And speaking of smart financial moves, I was really impressed to see that their debt-to-equity ratio went down.
Oh yeah, from 0.87 to 0.78.
Right. And you mentioned being interested in their debt levels. So this is a good sign, right? It means they're actively managing their debt, becoming more financially stable, which is essential if they want to grow in the long run.
Exactly. And this responsible financial management probably ties into their plans for expansion. They're aiming for a domestic capacity of 50 MTPA by 2030-31.
Wow, 50 MTPA.
That's more than double their current capacity. It's a big goal, and it needs a lot of investment. Their improved debt-to-equity ratio is a good indicator that they're in a solid position to get the funding they need.
So they're financially sound, ready to grow. But how are they actually planning to pull off this massive expansion? I know the reports mentioned some pretty big projects and acquisitions.
They're doing a few things. They're investing in brand new facilities, and they're expanding the ones they already have. The Delvi Phase 2 expansion, for example, is a big project that'll seriously increase their production capacity. They're also working on a slurry pipeline project in Odisha.
Odisha.
Yeah, and it's designed to be environmentally friendly. Plus, they're building new coke oven facilities at Vijayanagar. All of these projects really show how committed they are to modernizing their operations and getting more efficient.
It's like they're building a steel empire, brick by brick.
That's one way to put it. But they're not just focused on growing from within, they're making strategic acquisitions too.
Like what?
Well, take the acquisition of Mevine Steels Limited and Monnet Cement Limited. Those are perfect examples. It lets them expand their reach fast and get into new markets without having to build everything from the ground up.
Smart. So it's a mix of building new and buying existing.
Exactly. It's a really smart way to accelerate their growth and diversify what they offer.
It all sounds incredibly ambitious. But we can't forget how sensitive the steel industry is to the ups and downs of raw material costs. How are they dealing with those constantly changing prices of iron ore and coking coal?
That is a critical question, and it's where their strategic approach really comes into play. Domestic iron ore prices have been climbing because of greater international demand and more exports. To deal with that risk, they're focusing on getting raw materials from their own mines.
So they're not relying on the open market as much.
Right, and they're making, you guessed it, more strategic acquisitions. They're basically creating a safety net to protect themselves from market instability.
That makes sense. Being proactive about securing their supply chain. But what about coking coal?
Well, they've had some good luck there. Coking coal prices have been pretty stable. But they're not just banking on luck.
So what are they doing?
They're adjusting the mix of coal they use to rely less on prime hard coking coal, which is the priciest kind. They're using a blend of different types of coal to get the same quality, but at a lower cost.
Smart. So they're actively managing costs.
Yeah.
That's impressive. But all of this expansion and growth, it takes a lot of energy. How are they approaching the sustainability side of things? The world's really focused on reducing carbon emissions these days.
That's a perfect transition to talk about their sustainability efforts, and they are fascinating. They've set this goal of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050.
2050, that's a long way off.
It is, and it's a huge commitment, especially for a company in heavy industry. It shows they're serious about their environmental responsibility.
That's a pretty big goal. What are they actually doing to get there? Are they all talk or are they taking action?
Oh, they're definitely taking action. They're focusing on responsible resource management, cutting back on waste, and developing green steel technologies. They've also started a bunch of initiatives to shrink their carbon footprint, like investing in renewable energy and improving their energy efficiency.
It sounds like they're approaching sustainability from all angles. Can you give us some specific examples of what they're doing?
Absolutely. One that stood out to me was their development of dry pit slag aggregates for construction.
Slag aggregates.
Yeah. They're taking a waste product from steelmaking and turning it into something useful for building. It's a great example of the circular economy in action, reducing waste and creating new business opportunities.
That's incredible. It's not just about being environmentally friendly. It's about turning trash into treasure.
Exactly. And they're not stopping there. They're working on maximizing wastewater recycling and implementing programs to protect the biodiversity around their operations.
It's like they're weaving sustainability into everything they do.
They are. And they're not afraid to share their progress either. They're part of the India Business and Biodiversity Initiative, and they got an A score on the CDP Water Security Assessment.
What's that?
It's a global benchmark for how well companies manage water. It shows they're committed to being transparent and accountable when it comes to their environmental impact.
It sounds like they're leading the way in sustainable steel production.
They are. And focusing on sustainability isn't just good for the planet, it's good for their business. It helps them attract investors who care about ESG factors, and it strengthens their brand.
So they're proving that you can be both sustainable and profitable. Now let's talk about their position in the market. They're already the biggest steel producer in India, but where do they stand globally? What are their strengths, their weaknesses? Who are they competing with?
Well, they're definitely the top dog in India
Yeah.
with a 15% market share, but they're not content with just that. They're already a global player with facilities in the US and Italy, and they're actively trying to grow their international presence even more.
That's a big goal. But what about the competition?
The steel industry is incredibly competitive. JSW Steel is up against established giants in the US and Europe, plus there are all these up-and-coming steel producers in other parts of Asia.
Sounds like a tough battle.
Yeah.
How are they setting themselves apart in such a crowded market?
It's not just about making more steel. They're focusing on making high-quality, specialized steel products that are specifically designed for certain industries, like the automotive industry and renewable energy.
Interesting. So instead of trying to compete on price, they're finding these niche markets where they can charge a premium because of their expertise and the quality of their products.
Exactly. And this is where all their investment in research and development pays off. They're constantly innovating and developing new types of steel that meet the changing needs of their customers.
It's like they're not just reacting to trends, they're anticipating them and making sure they're leading the way.
That's exactly right. And it all connects back to their commitment to sustainability. Think about the growing demand for green steel, steel that's made with a much smaller carbon footprint. JSW Steel is investing heavily in technologies and processes that will let them meet this demand. It gives them a competitive edge in a market that's increasingly focused on sustainability.
We talked about their goal of net zero emissions. Can you give us some more details about how they're actually making their steel production greener? What are some of the technologies and initiatives they're using?
They're taking a multifaceted approach. One of the key areas is reducing their dependence on coal. They're looking into alternative fuels like hydrogen, and they're implementing carbon capture and storage technologies to capture emissions from their existing facilities.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly advanced. It's like they're trying to reinvent how steel is made.
In a lot of ways, they are. They're also investing in renewable energy to power their operations. And remember that dry pit slag aggregate initiative we were talking about? That's another way they're finding innovative ways to reduce waste and create a more circular economy.
It's amazing how they're connecting sustainability with cost savings and new business opportunities. It's not
Yes.
just about feeling good. It's a core part of their business strategy.
Absolutely. And it's something that investors and customers who are increasingly prioritizing sustainability are responding to. This focus on green steel is likely to be a major factor in setting JSW Steel apart in the global market.
So we have a company that's financially strong, strategically savvy, technologically advanced, and committed to sustainability. What's the catch? There have to be challenges they're facing as they try to achieve these ambitious goals.
Of course. No company operates without challenges. One of the biggest they're facing is navigating this complex and often unpredictable geopolitical landscape. Trade wars, protectionist policies, and fluctuations in currency exchange rates, all of that can impact their bottom line. They have to be flexible and able to adapt quickly to these global forces.
And that's true for any global business these days.
Yeah.
What about internally? Are there any areas where they could improve?
One area they're constantly working on is improving their efficiency. As they get bigger, they need to make sure their operations are as lean and efficient as possible if they want to stay profitable. They're investing heavily in automation and digitalization to streamline their processes and reduce costs.
So it's not just about building new factories and buying other companies. It's about constantly optimizing their internal operations.
Exactly. And that requires a strong focus on data analytics, process improvement, and employee training. They need to empower their workforce to embrace innovation and find new ways to do things better.
Speaking of employees, how does JSW Steel treat their workforce? Are they investing in their people as much as they're investing in technology and infrastructure?
That's a really important question, and it touches on the social responsibility aspect of their ESG commitments. From what I've seen, they prioritize employee safety, training, and development. They also seem to be focused on creating a diverse and inclusive workplace.
That's good to hear. A company is only as strong as its people.
Exactly. And in an industry like steel, attracting and retaining top talent is crucial for long-term success.
Okay, so JSW Steel seems to have a lot going for them. Strong financials, ambitious growth plans, a commitment to sustainability, a focus on innovation, and a dedication to their employees. What's next for them? Where do they go from here?
I think the next few years will be crucial for JSW Steel. They'll need to keep investing in R&D, expanding into new markets, and navigating those geopolitical challenges.
Sounds like an exciting time for them.
It really does. Their success will depend on their ability to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to technology, sustainability, and market trends. They've set a high bar for themselves, but they seem to have the vision, the resources, and the determination to achieve their goals.
I'm definitely interested to see what happens next.
Me too. And I think our listener will be just as fascinated to see how JSW Steel continues to shape the future of the steel industry.
Before we move on, I want to touch on something we haven't talked about directly yet. It's woven into everything we've discussed. JSW Steel seems to have a clear vision for the future. They're not just reacting to market conditions. They're actively shaping the industry.
That's a great point. They're thinking long-term and they're willing to make big bets on the future. Their commitment to sustainability, for example, is about more than just following regulations. It's about gaining a competitive advantage and positioning themselves as a leader in a world that's more and more focused on environmental responsibility.
Exactly. They're not just thinking about what steel production looks like today. They're thinking about what it could look like in 10, 20, even 30 years.
And that's what sets truly innovative companies apart. They're not afraid to shake things up and create a whole new way of doing things. JSW Steel seems to have that kind of bold spirit.
Well, I think we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored their financials, their expansion plans, how they handle raw materials, their sustainability initiatives, but there's still more to uncover.
There is a lot more. Welcome back. Ready to dig deeper into JSW Steel?
Absolutely. We've talked about their finances and their big growth plans, but to really understand what their future holds, we need to zoom in on their market position. They're already the top player in India.
Yeah, the king of the hill, so to speak.
But as they expand globally, they're facing some serious competition.
Right. Let's break that down a bit. Their 15% market share in India, that's impressive. Gives them a really solid base to build from. But the global steel market is a whole different ballgame. They're up against some huge established players in the US and Europe, not to mention all the new steel producers coming out of Asia.
It sounds like a real fight for dominance. How are they setting themselves apart? Is it just about making more steel, or are they doing something different?
It's not just about churning out tons of steel. They're focusing on quality, specialized steel products that are designed for specific industries. Think automotive, think renewable energy.
Okay, so not just any steel, but specific types.
Exactly. Those sectors need steel with very specific properties. Think about the steel they need for electric car parts or for wind turbine blades.
Right. It needs to perform in very specific ways.
And that's where JSW's investment in research and development really shines. They're constantly innovating, coming up with new types of steel that meet the changing needs of their customers.
So instead of just reacting to what the market wants, they're trying to anticipate it and stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And this also ties back to their commitment to sustainability. Remember all that talk about green steel?
Steel made with a smaller carbon footprint.
Yeah. The demand for that is only going to grow in the coming years. Governments and companies all over the world are trying to meet their climate targets. JSW is positioning themselves to be a leader in that market, investing in tech that cuts down their carbon footprint. So they can make steel with way fewer
They're
emissions.
not just following the trend, they're trying to create it.
Exactly. And that's a powerful statement, not just for the steel industry, but for any business these days. Sustainability and innovation aren't just burdens or limitations, they can be huge opportunities for growth.
I like that. It reminds me of something you said before about how JSW is investing a lot in research and development, especially for green steel. Why is that so important?
Well, like I said, demand for green steel is going to skyrocket in the next few years. All over the world, governments and industries are trying to reach their climate goals. JSW is setting themselves up to be a leader in this new market, investing in technologies that shrink their carbon footprint so they can make steel with far fewer emissions.
So they're getting ahead of the curve, not just reacting, but anticipating what's coming.
Right. It's like they're saying we're not just going to adapt to a changing world, we're going to be a part of creating that change.
I love that. So to sum up, we have a company that's financially solid, has big growth plans, is committed to sustainability, and is focused on innovation. Sounds almost too good to be true. What's the catch? What challenges are they facing?
Well, no company is perfect.
Mm.
One of their biggest challenges is navigating the geopolitical landscape. Things are changing all the time. It can be pretty volatile. Trade wars, protectionist policies, currency exchange rates, these all have an impact. They have to be flexible and adapt quickly.
That's the reality for any global business today. What about internally? Any weaknesses? Anything they need to improve?
One thing they're always working on is efficiency. As they grow, they need to make sure their operations are as streamlined as possible. They're putting a lot of resources into automation and digitalization to improve their processes and cut costs.
So it's not just about building new things and acquiring other companies. It's about constantly making sure they're working as efficiently as possible.
Exactly. And that means focusing on things like data analytics, process improvement, and employee training. Their workforce needs to be ready to embrace innovation and find ways to do things bigger.
Speaking of the workforce, how does JSW Steel treat its employees? Are they investing in their people as much as they invest in technology?
It's a good question. It really speaks to the social responsibility part of their ESG commitments. From what I've seen, they make employee safety, training, and development a priority. They also seem to be focused on creating a diverse and inclusive workplace.
That's good to hear. You're only as strong as your people. Right.
Absolutely. And in an industry like steel, attracting and keeping top talent is vital for long-term success.
So JSW Steel seems to be doing a lot of things right. Strong financials, ambitious growth, committed to sustainability, focused on innovation, taking care of their employees. What's next for them? What does the future hold?
The next few years are going to be critical for JSW. They need to solidify their global presence, keep investing in R&D, expand into new markets, and handle those geopolitical challenges we talked about.
Sounds like they're in for an exciting ride.
It does, doesn't it? Their success will depend on how well they can stay ahead of the curve, keeping up with technology, sustainability, market trends, all of that. They've set ambitious goals, but they seem to have what it takes to achieve them.
I'm curious to see how it all plays out.
Me too. I think our listener is going to be just as fascinated to see how JSW Steel continues to shape the future of the steel industry.
You know, before we wrap up this part of our deep dives, I want to mention something we haven't explicitly talked about. It's kind of woven into everything we've discussed, though. JSW seems to have this very clear vision for the future.
I see what you mean.
They're not just reacting to what's happening in the market. They're actively trying to shape the entire industry.
It's true. They're thinking long-term, not just focused on short-term gains. That's clear in everything from their expansion plans to their sustainability efforts. They understand that real success isn't just about making as much profit as possible right now. It's about building something that will last, something that creates value for everyone involved, even future generations.
Exactly. They're playing the long game.
I think there's a valuable lesson there for other businesses, big or small, no matter what industry they're in. In a world where everyone wants everything right now, JSW Steel is showing what can happen when you take a long-term view, embrace innovation, and put sustainability at the heart of your strategy.
It's a good reminder for all of us.
It is. JSW Steel is setting an example not just for the steel industry, but for everyone. They're showing that you can be ambitious and responsible at the same time, that you can grow your business while still contributing to a better future.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored JSW Steel's global market position, their strengths and weaknesses, their approach to sustainability, and their vision for the future. But we're not done yet.
Nope, there's more to come.
Welcome back to our deep dive into JSW Steel. We've covered a lot of ground, their financials, their expansion plans, how they're approaching sustainability, their position in the global market. But now, I think it's time to step back and look at the bigger picture.
What strikes me about JSW Steel is that they're not just playing the game, they're changing the rules of the game. They're showing the world that a steel company can actually be a force for good, you know? They're embracing sustainability, innovation, and using those as ways to grow.
Exactly. It's not just about how much steel you can make anymore. It's about making the right kind of steel. High-quality, specialized stuff that the world needs, especially in a world that's so focused on efficiency, sustainability, and tech.
And they're showing everyone that this approach can be profitable and responsible. It's not one or the other. They've figured out how to weave sustainability into their core operations. It's creating value for their shareholders, their customers, and, the planet.
It reminds me of something you mentioned earlier about how JSW is putting a lot of resources into research and development, particularly when it comes to green steel. Can you talk a bit more about that? Why is that so important?
Sure. The demand for green steel, it's only going to go up in the next few years. As governments and industries all around the world try to hit their climate goals, they're going to need it. JSW is getting ready to be a leader in this new market by investing in technologies that make their carbon footprint smaller so they can make steel with way fewer emissions.
So they're not just going with the flow, they're anticipating the changes and getting ahead of the curve. They're helping to create the change.
Exactly. That's such a powerful message. And it's not just for the steel industry, it's for any business out there. Sustainability and innovation aren't things to be afraid of. They're opportunities.
Something I've been thinking about throughout our deep dive is that JSW Steel seems to be thinking really long term. They're not just worried about the next quarter or the next year. They're making decisions that will have an impact for decades to come.
Yeah, you're right. They're playing the long game. You can see it in everything they do, from their expansion plans to their sustainability efforts. They get it. Real success isn't about squeezing every last penny out of the present. It's about building something that will last, something that benefits everybody, even future generations.
It's a good lesson for all of us, no matter what business we're in. It's easy to get caught up in the short term, but JSW Steel is a good example of what can happen when you have a long-term vision.
Totally agree. JSW Steel isn't just setting an example for the steel industry, they're setting an example for all businesses. They're showing the world that you can be ambitious and responsible at the same time, that you can grow your business and still be a part of building a better future.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listener will remember?
I think the most important thing to remember about JSW Steel is that they're not afraid to shake things up. They're constantly pushing the limits, both in how they run their business and in how committed they are to sustainability. It's a company to keep an eye on, not just because of how well they're doing financially, but because they're leaders in creating a more sustainable and innovative future for the steel industry.
Well said. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of JSW Steel. It's been fascinating. And to our listener, thank you for diving deep with us. We hope you learned something new and that this has given you something to think about.